Welcome to Wake Up with Joni, the podcast where spiritual awakening meets conscious leadership, embodied wisdom, and real world application. Today's guest is a true architect of transformation, not just in technology, but in culture, systems, and leadership itself. Kris Land is a pioneering force in technology, integration, and executive strategy. With more than 2 decades in top tier leadership roles, Kris has built a career at the intersection of innovation and execution. But what makes this conversation so powerful isn't just Chris' profound understanding of technology in a rapidly changing world, it's his ability to harmonize systems and structure with the human element, cultivating cultures of integrity, discipline, innovation, and continuous evolution. Given the rise of the machines, aka AI, this is a profoundly timely conversation, in my opinion. So let's wake up with Kris Land. Welcome.
Thank you, Joni. It's a pleasure being here.
Yes, I'm so excited. I can't wait to talk about your book, The Infinity Within, which is, if they're watching YouTube, they can see it right there on the screen. I love to find out who my guest is before they dive in. So, how did you do what you do? And then at what point did it turn into a more internal exploration?
Great question. And it turns out to be a cyclical loop.
Mm.
I grew up in North Dakota. I was very much an introvert, or what would be considered a computer nerd. Started working with electronics when I was very young, and then started selling computers, Apple IIs, when I was in junior high. I had a gentleman come in and he bought an Apple and he wanted to do accounting software. And I knew how to code and he knew what he wanted. And so we formed a little company around that. We wrote the software, sold the software, and I made a bunch of money. The problem was that very shortly after that, I fell into a deep depression. So this falls along the lines of people winning the lottery and destroying their lives. And I got a particular viewpoint from my perspective on why and how this looks. So for me, what happened is at that age, I had thought I'd completed everything I was supposed to. All my goals were gone. I'd done everything I thought I was supposed to do. And it left me with now what? And that put me in a place of depression. From there, I created 3 simple goals. Took me a while to get there, a month or two, to produce 3 simple goals that I can never achieve, but I can always work towards. And that was to have fun, to learn, and to do neither at the harm or impedance of others. And with those 3 goals, I was able to start scrabbling up. And then I got hired by a gentleman, his name was Chris as well, at a bank in San Diego. And in working for him, I found out he was an atheist, which for me is, I don't have any issue with people believing whatever they want to believe. However, for me, it didn't sit right for him. So I dug into it and I said, well, okay, what's that look like? And I ended up coming up with 4 questions that, when asked, it doesn't prove whether we have a soul or not. That's not simply done. But what it does do is it points to all the benefit is in believing we have a soul, and all the downside is in believing we don't. But then came an intersection of points. So the first intersection is, growing up, I've had a lot of what would be considered odd or strange or not possible things happen to me. I've had out of body experiences. I've had near death experiences. I've had all kinds of interesting things that are not considered normal. And on top of that, I had a thirst for understanding theology and different theologies and learning about all the different ways that spirituality looks at things, just as a curiosity, combined with asking Chris these 4 questions and seeing it make a shift for him. It left me with a question. Okay, we have a soul. What is it? What are we doing here? What does this look like? And because of my technical engineering background, I don't believe questions sit very well. So I said, all right, well, what is a soul? All I could really draw on is all the different theologies. And one of the things I found out for me is that even though all the theologies have different semantics, They all say the same thing.
Hmm.
And so I'm going to use the Bible because it's the most read book, I think, on the planet, and it's easy to reference. However, you can reference other theologies if you like. But in the Bible, there's chapters and verses, and not one or two. There's multiple chapters and verses that say we are the children of God. We will inherit all of our Father's abilities. Jesus telling his disciples, you will do everything I have done and much more. And then you take a look at that, you go, okay, let's take a little stretch for a minute and say that this is more literal than philosophical. So that means that if we are the children, that we are souls, then we're gods. Great. Well, what does that mean and why are we here? Right. So then the next question is, well, okay, first off, let's start with what does a soul do? If a soul is an omnipotent being that exists outside of time and space, what does it do? I could only come up with three things. It creates stuff, meaning universes and constructs. It destroys stuff, and it plays games. Yeah. Right? So those three things, when you boil it down, the first two are really easy to describe. Creation, destruction. That's pretty straightforward. The game, you have to go into a little bit more. What is a game? What does a game consist of? I could only come up with three things. You have pieces, you have turns, and you have rules. That's a game. Okay, great. So we have an idea of what a game is in general and what a soul is doing. So that leads us to why here. Let's take a little journey and say for a minute that we're on the game called Planet Earth. And that at the pearly gates up here, we have this entry point where the soul can choose to play this game when we pull the Monopoly box off the shelf and decide to play. And we're up there. We know that the pieces are us. That's fairly straightforward. Turns are described in pretty much all theologies as resurrection and lifetimes. Okay, that takes care of that one. What do the rules look like?
Then who makes them?
I would argue that we agree to them. Now, where they were made, I don't get into too much. However, there are some concepts and ideas that we could certainly discuss. But let's just say that the 8 rules that I discuss in the Infinity Within are close and see what they look like. However, your question is very valid and very good. Who originally created the game of Earth, right? So rule 1 would be, in order to make this all, first off, before we get into the rules, I want to talk a little bit more about what the game looks like. So the game is in a 4th dimensional construct, meaning that time is the primary motivator. And in 3 dimensions below, time doesn't exist. In 5 dimensions above, time exists, but it's not the primary motivator, meaning the key focal point. So we first have to ask a question, what would a soul be interested in playing? What would be really fascinating for a soul to play in a 4th dimensional construct? And I can only come up with one thing.
I'm wondering if it's actually in alignment with what popped into my head. So go ahead.
I want to hear what popped into your head.
To uncover who we really are.
Okay. Very close. We're splitting hairs. I would say that experience or experiencing emotion.
Mhm. Experiencing awareness.
Awareness. Yeah, who we are.
Yes.
But more fundamentally, the experience of emotion, because in time, you can experience a progression of emotion, right? And the progression of experience. Okay, so that might be interesting on why we went to play. Now we can take a look at the rules. So before we enter, we agree to put all of our godlike abilities and leave them up here, away. Why would we do that? Very simply, because if we play Monopoly and I take all the pieces and all the properties and all the money, you're not going to want to play Monopoly with me because it's not a lot of fun.
Mhm.
So by agreeing to put all my godlike abilities to the side, I can play in this game as a person. Okay, that works. Except if my goal is experiencing emotion and my favorite dog runs across the street and gets run over, and I just draw on my power and go, no, 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 that didn't happen, then I can experience some, but it's going to be pretty diluted because anything I don't like, I just change.
So is there a motivation in feeling, because you can't feel emotion without the human body?
Or in the
Is
construct,
there,
right?
yes. Is there a motivation for what is the goal of feeling?
Just the experience of it. If the idea that a soul is this energy source that exists outside of time and space, and it only can do three things, really, then experiencing emotion seems that would be pretty interesting.
Hmm.
But to do that, you have to enter a game, and the game has to have certain rules.
So there's no true endpoint for feeling the emotions. It's
Well,
just,
unless you're outside of time.
okay.
If you're outside of a time based construct, then the progression of time, meaning emotion, doesn't happen.
Okay.
So, fourth dimensional time being the primary motivator is really key
It's the
to
leverage.
the progression of
If
emotional experience, right?
the leverage of moving forward. Okay.
And moving through time to do the experiential part.
Okay.
Okay,
So
so
before we pick up and keep going, because there is definitely a flow to what you're doing, there are so many little questions along the way, if I may.
you may.
Okay. So science and spirituality, quantum physics and that thing, how do you think they dovetail? Are they the same or mirror each other?
Science is part of the experience. Right now, the science that we know exists within the game.
Okay.
And if you're not in the game and you're in a different game, then the science could be very different.
Hmm.
But for the game of planet Earth, we have science that exists the way we know it today.
What I'm getting at was the quantum physics piece has become more prevalent in the last 10, 20 years specifically, that then is able to quantifiably measure things that used to be miracles or invisibles. And so it's validating in a way the energetic piece of spirituality.
Absolutely. Yeah. So your quantum physics, quantum entanglement, quantum communications, quantum computers, all of those things up until a few years ago would be considered magic.
Mhm.
And if you look at the time progression of humanity, anything that surpasses the science far enough is considered to be magic until it's understood. Another way of saying that is there's a vibrational state of everything. Everything that we have going on in this material world is arguably not material at all. It's a bunch of atoms, electrons, and quantum physics moving around at very fast speeds, which give us the perception of reality. And then the question is does reality exist with or without thought, which gets into Schrodinger's cat, or does a tree make a noise when it falls and nobody's there to hear it? So the question is thought creating reality as we go, or is reality part of a game that's a construct that we are co-creating as we move through it? And I would argue the second.
Yes. Yes. Love the word co-creating. So another thread I want to pull, because I don't want to miss any of these little nuggets. When you said you got depressed after you thought you had reached the pinnacle, there was nowhere else to go. Now what? And you said it was have fun. What was the other one?
Learn,
Learn.
curiosity,
Right?
and do neither at the harm or impedance of others.
Okay. Love it. So that covers everything.
It gives me a foundation to go do stuff.
Is that still your North Star, or has it matured as you have?
No, fundamentally, it's still what I do. There's two subtle questions there. Do you mature and change? The answer is no. I designed those goals to never be achievable
Mhm.
and to always be sought after. So in this lifetime, I don't know if they will ever mature out because those are three goals that I can never fully achieve. I can never learn everything. I can never cease having fun, hopefully. and I can hopefully do neither the harm or repeats of others. So it's a thing that was designed and chosen, those three items, so that they would continue with me for this whole turn.
Yeah. A lot of people ask the question, how do I find my purpose? And they can borrow your
Absolutely.
that because that covers everyone. I also find that one of the things you're doing, I believe, in the book and in these podcasts is being of service, which is sharing that joy, sharing that curiosity, and not doing harm. Okay. I'm
Absolutely.
going to share with us the 4 questions.
I certainly can.
Okay.
All right. So we'll take a little divestiture back to the
Yeah.
soul part. So I looked at the whole thing and I said, okay, how do I show somebody the benefit? So it starts out, and I'll ask you the questions so that you can answer them. For a minute, let's assume that we are all just a piece of clay, meaning we have no soul. What happens if you believe, if you are a piece of clay and you believe you have no soul?
How can I believe I have no soul if I don't have
No,
a
it's a
soul?
question. What happens? What happens to play? You got to put yourself into the question, right? I understand that you don't believe that. I get that. But just for the sake of the question, put yourself for a minute in the place of I have no soul and I believe I have no soul. What does that mean to me as that entity?
There's nowhere to go.
Exactly. Okay. So
Okay.
now let's say that you have no soul. What happens if you believe you have a soul anyway?
Then I've created a soul.
Maybe if you're a piece of clay, you really don't have godlike abilities. So you
But I can think that
expand.
I have a soul.
Bingo. So, but again, if we're not soul entities, then that thinking is just a construct within a piece of clay, right? But what it does do is it expands your way of thinking,
Mhm.
right?
Okay.
Even though you're a piece of clay. Now go to the second set of questions. You have a soul, but what happens if you believe you don't have a soul, even though you do?
Of conflict,
Okay.
suffering,
Okay. And if you have a soul, what happens if,
possibility.
okay. So where is the pro and the con in this?
In which part?
Do you see any benefit in believing you don't have a soul?
I
Based
see
on
where
what
we're going. Okay. Yes, yes,
do you
yes.
believe, in answering the questions, do you see any benefit in believing you don't have a soul?
It is very much aligned with a conversation I had the other day. Very much aligned with what makes me feel most grounded in this world is that there is a soul, there is a spirituality, there is something much greater than me. Therein that I am part of source, as we're going back to that conversation about we are all God. That brings me comfort, it brings me purpose, it gives me direction.
And it resonates.
Yes. Therefore, whether it can be proved or not, or it's true or not, it's true for me and it works.
Exactly right.
All right.
In the book, in chapter 2, is where Gabriel, he goes by Gabe, who's the main character in my book, meets Elias at a coffee shop. Strange, huh? Because I love coffee. Anyway, the way he meets Elias is he sees him. Elias is ordering some coffee, sits down, and the very first question Elias asks Gabe is, do you believe you have a soul? That's the opening question from some random person.
Okay.
And then they talk about a soul a little bit. And then Gabe says, well, okay, I understand we're talking about this. And I understand that everybody talks about souls and blah, blah, blah. He says, there's no proof. How do I know there's a soul? What is this? And Elias asks, he's a very good mentor because the way he approaches things is asking questions. So he
Socratically.
says, I totally get this. I understand that believing you have a soul can be challenging. Let me ask you this. Do you believe love exists?
Where can you see it?
Where's it real? Where's it tangible? Where's there scientific proof?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And yet, do you believe it exists?
Yeah. It's a beautiful correlation.
So why can't you take the concept of the belief? So you have to take yourself to the feeling, the belief that love is real and apply it to the soul. and it makes a fundamental shift.
Yeah, I think that's very helpful for people. That's, yeah, well put. Are we going to talk about the 8 rules or shall we continue on the thread you were on?
The thread I was on is on the rules.
Okay, let's do it.
Okay. Rule 1 is we agree to put all of our godlike abilities up here
Up there. Okay.
so we can play. But as I described, that doesn't really fit the goal of experiencing emotions, because anytime something happens we don't like, we just draw on our powers and change it. In comes rule 2. We agree to forget that we ever had them.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that works, but it's an infinite trap.
Mm-hmm.
If you just have those 2 rules, then you'll never tap back into what you were. And I'm assuming souls are pretty smart and aren't going to play a game that infinitely traps them. Hence, rule 3.
Okay.
We're going to have turns, and those turns are lifetimes. And in those turns, before we enter the game, there's certain things that we're going to roughly want to accomplish and do for each turn before we're allowed to go on to the next turn. And if we don't achieve them, we get to do it over and over and over again until we do. And then we get to move on to the next turn, and eventually leave the game. Okay, now we have our general construct to the game. What's the 4th rule? The 4th rule is we're going to be totally invested when we're playing. The other 4 rules you get to read.
Okay.
But those 4 rules by themselves lay out the construct of answering the question you had, which is, or we had, which is, if we're a soul, what's the point? Why are we here? And what's going on? We're a godlike entity that's agreed to put our abilities aside, forget that we have them. We're in these turns that we want to accomplish certain things from a very upper soul point of view. But as humans, we've agreed to forget all this is going on. However, we're going to leave ourselves little signposts that if we're paying attention, we can listen to, see, and start reconnecting to what we really are and remembering and using those to go out and do stuff.
So signposts meaning you come in with a particular talent or you hear something and it resonates deeply and suddenly there's a shift and then you take it and run.
As simple as there's no such things as coincidences.
Oh, absolutely. There are no
I call them coinkydinks. They don't exist. Everything that happens because we are all interconnected is happening for a purpose. We just, unless we're paying attention, we don't see the small miracles that happen every day. And the more we look past the illusionary curtain, the more we start seeing these small miracles for what they are, that they are actually more real than what we're taught is real.
There's a great term, everything happens for you, not to you, which has been bandied about quite a bit last decade. And I think it's incredibly powerful and very true. But if you just say that to somebody who thinks everything's happening to them, it blows their circuits a little bit. But the way you just put it is the explanation for why everything's happening for you, not to you.
Exactly right. It's interesting because one of the really scary things about, let me jump off and jump back onto the scary things. The way I intentionally wrote the book was to not preach and not tell people how to believe anything.
Mhm.
That's not my goal. My goal is that you follow Gabe through a cycle of life. And as you watch and listen to the questions that Elias asks and that Gabe experiences and does, it'll either reflect things to you or it won't. You'll take things from it or you won't. And that's all okay. Everybody, every one of us is in a different part of our journey. I designed the book to provide mirrors for different parts of that journey for whatever you want to take from it. And if you don't want to take anything, that's okay too, because I've written the book to be fun while reading as well. But it's designed to subtly start taking a look and showing what's possible if you want to take a look at it.
So let's talk about this is in alignment with this question. Everybody has a different all in.
Mhm.
So to play the game on Earth, they have to be all in, or that's one of the first rules. And everyone's looks different. Because I was talking to somebody this morning who is, why can't they just get it? And I said what my mentor said to me, which is not everybody is meant to wake up in this
At
life.
least not this term.
Not this turn. Or you could call incarnation. Yeah.
Or this incarnation. Absolutely. I call it turn just to make it simple, but absolutely incarnation, reincarnation, as far as I can tell, and what I've experienced personally is a very, very real thing.
Okay. Do you want to share?
Sure. One of the things that happened to me now, when I tell this story, I just warn everybody listening, you might have to add your own grain of salt to it. Why? Because when we're growing up, have you ever heard the story of children being able to see ghosts?
Of course, until they're 7,
Okay. Why?
because they haven't taken on the beliefs of society that we're not supposed to be able to see ghosts.
And our parents, in order to help us and protect us, they come from a place of love, tell us it's not real and it's imagined to protect us from the fear that they see us having.
Right. So,
Without understanding that what they're really doing is enforcing these artificial illusionary rules that probably aren't real.
mhm.
Okay. So when anybody tells stories about things that are not real and miracles, there's all these answers of it's not real, it's imagined, Kris ate the wrong thing, whatever it is. And that's all okay too. But I'll tell you what happened from my perspective. And if you'd been sitting at the wedding dinner with me, then it would have been real for you as well. So I moved to San Diego when I was 18. And a new friend of mine was friends with the bride and groom of a wedding I got invited to. And I was sitting across the table from the groom's mom and dad. Dad's name was Richard. And we're just having a conversation. We're just talking and having a great time. And we really weren't paying attention to much other than just really talking about stuff. And we started down this path of, oh, wait, I remember you. Yeah, we did these things together. We had a barbecue at this place. Yeah, we were on the manufacturing plant of a Ford Motor Company in Chicago, and we were building these amphibious vehicles for the military and these Mercury sedans. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And we talked about some people we knew and these experiences that we had together.
In another lifetime.
We were just talking.
Oh.
We were
Oh,
just having a conversation you and I are having now.
okay.
And then I look over, and the wife is sheet white. And it's okay, what's going on? I said, what's up? She says, how old are you? And I said, well, I'm 20. She says, you guys do realize you're talking about things that happened 40 years ago
And he was
in
how
detail.
he was how old? Was it actually
He was 60 at the time.
okay. Okay. So he was actually there and you were there in a different body.
I certainly wasn't there 40 years ago in my 20-year-old body.
In your
So,
negative
but
zero.
but he recognized me as past soul, and I recognized him. And we had a full on conversation of things that we'd done together and things that we were both managers on a supervising line on a Ford Motor Company for building these Mercury sedans and these amphibious vehicles for the military.
Wow. That's actually very interesting. I've
That's
never yeah.
cut and dry.
Yeah. I'd say there's evidence there. Excellent.
So I've had a number of these things happen that completely shifted what was real, what I was told was real, and what was real for me. And that drove everything.
Nice. Thank you for sharing that. I want to shift gears a little bit because I've got me a big brain right here in front of me. You have a lot of history and you want to talk about evidence of knowing what you're doing with technology and all the things out there. And in this day and age, with AI coming in, I know you work with leadership. I'd like you to just go off on a tangent if you're in that area. What is happening? What do you see coming? How are leaders going to your eyebrows? How are leaders going to adapt? How is everyone going to adapt? There, just a small question.
That's a really big question. So I've been in the technology space, as I mentioned, for a very long time. I was arguably part of computers coming into the world. I worked with Apple at a very young age. I worked with a number of major players. I took a company public with a guy named Nolan Bushnell, who was the founder of Atari. I've been doing this a long time. The concept of AI, artificial intelligence, started, even back in the Apple II days, because I remember a company called, I don't remember the name of the company, but the product they made was called Lisp, Lisp. And it was the first language that attempted to be able to write, that you could write with, and then it could change itself. And then Pascal, UCSD Pascal came out, which was at that time the language for writing AI. And it didn't go very far because the technology was very, very, very in its infancy. And then we moved forward in time. And then we had the advent of the internet. One of my companies called Paradox was one of the 3 companies in the world developing electronic mail. We were a founding company of email. And we worked with Ray Norda, who owned a company. He bought a company called Novell, which at that time was the leader in networking technology for microcomputers. And I worked directly with Ray and his staff, and we created a number of really cool products. AI was consistently bubbling in the back. Then, so even today, what is AI? AI is not artificially intelligent. It's a very advanced rule engine that uses a bunch of data points and then these trees of logic to sort through huge amounts of data to come up with these very complex answers. And the technology in the last 5 years has been phenomenal. If you'd asked me 5 years ago, when will a singularity or a sentient being come out of this? I would have said maybe 20, 25 years. Now with how fast, because the problem with technology, when I say problem, the thing with technology is that it is growing on the exponential curve,
Mhm.
meaning each year it's doubling or tripling or going much faster than it did the year before. And it's not slowing down.
Isn't the AI accelerating that?
What's happening is AI is now writing code.
Yeah.
So now AI can write its own code and can modify its own code and do those things. So what happens is that the idea of reaching what's called a singularity or a truly intelligent artificial intelligence, and when I say intelligent, I mean sentient, meaning it's self-aware. I would say we may be within 10 years of that. Pros and cons of that.
Yes. What
Okay.
is yeah.
So the first thing I would suggest for anybody, because this can get very dark and scary and it can get very exciting, is to go read The Two Faces of Tomorrow. It's a book that was written in the 70s, and it's a pretty good book about the possible outcomes of where we're headed. What I like about The Two Faces of Tomorrow is it takes it somewhat down the dark side, but ends up coming out a little bit lighter. And I don't want to say much more because I don't want to ruin the ending of the book, but it's worth reading for those people that are curious. I read that a long time ago. There are other versions of our potential history, or not history, our future, which is The Matrix,
Mhm.
Terminator,
Mhm.
and I could go on and on and on.
Mhm.
So the problem with a sentient artificial intelligent being is that it's not going to have necessarily the same constructs or thoughts of empathy and or loyalty and the things that make humans really good. And it may carry some of the things that make humans not so nice. And one of the probable outcomes, because humans are humans, is that if it becomes aware, it becomes sentient, and we figure it out fairly early on, that we might become scared and then try to squish it or kill it or lock it up. and thereby actually creating some pretty negative retribution from that. So there's a lot of things in there that are very gray. Humans have the innate and incredible ability to do wonderful things and wonderful goodness. And unfortunately, the opposite as well.
Mhm.
So if we're creating a brand new being, the probability of it having both sides of that is fairly high. Now, where does it run with that? First off, we have now, as a race, put the entire planet together with technology. We run everything on technology. We have satellites that are all connected, and we have a worldwide web connected through not only satellites, but fiber optics, and all of our desktops, all of our phones, all of our cars, all of our stoplights, all of our power systems. Everything is tied into technology, which is fine, except that this artificial intelligence native world will be this world,
Mhm.
which means that as it grows, it will have the ability to expand, learn, and do things in that space much quicker at some point than we will ever be able to track.
Mhm.
And then things security. We talked earlier about quantum physics and quantum reality. One of the things that's interesting is the new quantum computers. I don't know if you've read this or seen this, but they're able to. So we have this thing called 256 encryption, which is the typical thing that we use now for encrypting our bank logins and our different things and stuff. And the government uses 512, 1024, much bigger encryption systems. A quantum computer can crack a 250. So let me rephrase this. A 256-bit encryption would take today's computer, I think it's 1,000 years to break using brute force.
Mhm.
A quantum computer can break it in an hour.
Wow.
And that's today's quantum computers, which are expanding pretty quickly. So what that means is that all of the security that we use to secure and lock away our stuff, which is on this native environment, we're actually building systems that can crack our own stuff really fast. And this entity will have access to all of this.
Mm.
So it gets very interesting in a hurry. Now, what does this look like? At the same time all this is going on, have you ever heard of the age of Aquarius?
Oh, of course.
Okay. This happened back in the 70s and 80s, right? So, or the starting of it.
Starting of it because it's
Of it,
yeah,
right.
yeah.
So I would suggest at the same time we've got AI singularity on the horizon, the human consciousness is also doing a fair amount of expansion right now.
Mhm.
So then that begs the question, if we're godlike beings, is a singularity big of a challenge? Or is it just part of the experience within this fourth dimensional construct? If we're a piece of clay or don't have a soul or don't exist outside of space and time, we could truly be in trouble.
Mhm.
However, if we're soul beings playing in a game, then it's just part of the game. So it adds a lot of variations and what ifs when you start having both paths looked at in parallel.
Mhm. Mhm. There is one way to hold it, which is it is what it is, and it's
It's
coming.
happening whether we or not.
It is what it is. So, I not to go to fear, but to be smart. So what are some smart things that we can do?
I would suggest starting to look at fear as signposts. Started looking at doubt as the concrete that holds the illusionary curtain in place and keeps us from forgetting what we are.
Mm.
In the introduction of the Infinity Within,
Mhm.
I named 4 characters, 4 people, and I chose them very intentionally as the introductory teachers of what we are all capable of being and doing. The first one I bring up is Jesus Christ, because fairly straightforward, pretty easy. He's done a lot of amazing things according to the Bible, according to our history. He's certainly had a very strong effect on mankind. Then we have the Buddha. Same kind of very broad effect on mankind and consciousness and being in the present and all those things. The third person I chose because of what he went through to get where he is and the books and how profound I think the books are. And that's Eckhart Tolle or Eckhart Tolle. Because
Interesting.
his
Yeah.
books, if you read them, are pretty groundbreaking.
Yes.
The fourth one, my mom got mad at me for. She read the book. She goes, "What are you doing, including this guy in your list of these incredible people?" And I said, "Let me tell you, I included Elon Musk."
Hmm.
Now, why? I would argue that if you and I sat down with Elon and said, "Hey, Elon, are you a spiritual leader?" He'd probably say no. However, here is a man that is consistently from childhood been told what he can't do, doubt being forced on him in every direction, being told he can't do stuff consistently. You cannot build a car company in today's world. DeLorean completely failed at it. It will never happen. And yet today, Tesla is arguably the largest car manufacturing company in the world. You can't land rockets. It's impossible. NASA's spent billions of dollars. All the other countries in the world have tried this. Nobody's done it. It's impossible. Yet several years later, he's doing it consistently on a daily and weekly basis. Elon, it is absolutely impossible for you to run multiple $1 million companies. You can't do it as the CEO. It is impossible for anybody to do that. And yet he's doing it every single day. So here's an example of somebody that may not have tapped into the "I'm going to go out and heal somebody from death" power, but he has certainly removed doubt and tapped into the parts of his soul that he wanted to tap into to go create the things he wanted to create. And his drive is to create a multi-planetary species for the humankind. He didn't do this with a bunch of doubt playing in his field. He didn't do this with a bunch of fear taking over what he thought he could and could not do. So to answer your question, I would say every one of us can in fact do what Elon has done and is doing. As we look at fear, strip it down, be curious about it, ask questions of where our fear is coming from and why it's stopping us and how it's currently serving us, and then stripping down doubt in what we can and cannot do and just doing it.
I love the way you said that, because fear, people think it's random, but it is serving a purpose. So that's a great question. What is this fear doing for me? What is this fear?
Or against. Right?
Yeah. Well, that's it.
But yes,
It's
exactly.
keeping me small. It's keeping me safe. It's keeping me separate.
It's keeping me not responsible.
Yes. Yes. And
Because when you tap into what you really are, one of the really scary things,
can't go back.
you actually, yeah, you can't get back, but you're actually now figuring out, oh, wait a minute, I'm responsible for all this co-creation going on,
Mm.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a hard pill to swallow. People have had some pretty horrific things happen in their life. How do you explain that? It's a lot more comfortable to say this stuff happened to me and be the victim. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. It's part of how we are. It's part of our experience, but it's a very real protection mechanism as well.
Yes. Absolutely. This is far and above what I expected from my research on you even. What a great conversation. What do you think is going to happen as AI expands, roles are reduced for humans? What and who becomes obsolete? And what replaces it?
You're asking, I would say, two parallel questions.
Mhm.
If you believe what mainstream media and what we're taught is real, and that we're small little individual items or pieces that aren't connected, then there's a lot of things and people and places that will become obsolete by that definition. If you remember who and what you are and reconnect to what you are, then the understanding of co-creation. Did I talk about how people come up and talk to me?
No.
Okay. Since I've been going to coffee shops and restaurants, I'll be sitting there reading my book quietly, minding my own space. And random people will literally pull up a chair. Don't even ask me. Just pull up a chair, sit down, and then tell me their life story.
Mm-hmm.
And then we'll have a conversation and they'll get up and they'll leave. Initially, I thought it was very odd. Why is this happening? Then I went to the point of, and what got me to come up with the idea that there are no coinkydinks is that when I really took a curiosity to this and started asking on each time it happened, why? What I found was that every single time somebody came to me and needed to hear something I had to say, and I needed to hear something they had to say.
They brought you a nugget.
They brought me a nugget. They got a nugget in exchange.
Mm-hmm.
Was that a coincidence? Or are we all interconnected and we made a particular space and time happen in order to accomplish a certain thing on our soul path, which coincidentally was the original title for the book, Our Soul Path, because it was coming from that genesis of, I think that every time we're connected with somebody for a minute, an hour, a day, a year, 20 years, a lifetime, that these are all different soul paths, soul mates, different versions, 1 hour soulmates, one lifetime soulmates, 10-year soulmates, whatever it is, that we interconnect and connect on a pre agreement that we make in order to achieve and do certain things on our path.
Some stayed for 30 years. Some
Yeah.
stayed for 30 minutes.
Yep. And some I can argue stay for multiple lifetimes
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and are reconnected each lifetime, even though they don't initially remember why, but there's just some reason we get connected. And then all of a sudden, things expand from there. So the AI conundrum, is it replacing certain jobs? So in a scary, fast way. It can gather information and do things and create content faster than anybody can. Does it have the pure curiosity and creativity that we each have? No. Is it tied into the source or the infinite? No. So that gets into belief and understanding and remembering what we are. And if getting to those 4 questions, ultimately, if we believe we have a soul, what does that look like? Do the 4 rules and the 4 more rules you get to read about make sense to you? How does it fit? You're looking, how does it vibrate? How does it sit with you? And then what do you do with it? How do you take it? Because if we're these omnipotent beings playing in a game, then is anything going to be replaced? Not really, because we're all interconnected doing stuff for the experience.
Perfect. So when I say the word trust, what would you say to the listeners about that word in connection to what you're saying?
Comes first from yourself. We're taught not to trust ourselves. And we're taught when we're a child that that ghost was our imagination. It never happened. It wasn't real. And even though it was taught from a place of benevolence, it still taught us one thing: don't trust what's going on. And it starts at a very young age. We're not allowed to trust these little miracles that happen daily, these coincidences. We call coincidences in order to protect ourselves and not see the miracle for what it is. The fact that we're having this chat right now, I would say, was a co-creation connection for us to have this at this time because we each needed to do it now.
Hmm.
So trust is starting to pay attention to and trust ourselves and what's happening around us and listen and be curious.
Love that word. That is one of my favorite words in life, is to approach everything with curiosity. I don't know. So
Yeah.
we are coming toward the end of our time together. Darn it. Is there anything that you want to share or talk about that we have not covered? I know there's vast podcasts within you, but in this conversation, what comes for you?
There are two types of fears that exist. There's the one where the saber-toothed tiger is chasing you down the hill and you better run. And we've been taught that since we were cavemen. That's a very visceral one and kind of should listen to it in a really big way. Then there's the mental fear, which is just as real for our psyche as that saber-toothed tiger. But arguably, you can be more curious about it because it won't eat you right then and there. So use fear as a signpost to start being curious. When you're going down a path as simple as I would like to get a raise from my boss, but I'm fearful. I don't want to do it because I'm afraid. Okay, why? What are you fearful about? Are you fearful you're going to get laughed at? Are you fearful the boss is going to say no? Are you fearful you're going to get fired? By simply asking those questions, you've just created a space of freedom for yourself. Because if your worst fear is, I'm going to get fired, which is the bigger one, right? Now, instead of having a fear stopping you, you get to make a choice. Am I willing to ask for my raise and get fired? Or am I not willing? So you've turned fear now into a choice, which you can then take a look at. Okay, what am I doubting? Am I doubting what I'm doing is enough and important enough for my boss? Am I doubting my abilities? Am I doubting my ability to go get another job if I get fired? Why does that exist for me? What can I manifest differently and what can I choose differently if I choose to go down the path of asking and getting fired? But what you've done is you've moved it from a place of fear to a place of choice, and from a place of choice to removing doubt. That's what I would leave all of us with.
Okay, beautiful. So, where can they find you if they need a keynote speaker or they want to buy your book?
I've been extremely fortunate and blessed in that way. If you go on Google and type in my name, Kris Land, KR, or the Infinity Within, I take up the first 3 pages of Google. So you can find me
That's
pretty
because
much
you're
anywhere.
a computer guy and you did that.
Well, and somewhat I'd say the universe and the source
That's
or my connection to the source, right? Also, there's a Kris Land, KRISLAND.com. There's, if you want to get the 21-day free journey companion book or booklet, you can go to theinfinitywithin.me. From the book perspective, you can get it at Barnes and Noble. You can get it at all places, Walmart. You can get it on Apple. You can get it on iTunes. You can get it on Amazon, all the different versions. If you have a moment, I'll tell you a little bit of a story about the Audible book version.
okay.
So this is, I said, it's something that I'm very proud of. When I finished the book and published it in July, I went out and looked for a narrator for the book.
And you couldn't find one with a better voice than you.
Actually, I could.
Oh,
There's a specific person that I wanted. And there's a specific voice and a particular way that I wanted it narrated. And I found this guy who's done, I think, over 750 books narrated.
wow.
He's done Eckhart Tolle's books. He's done the Dalai Lama's books. He's done Dean Kuntz's books. And he's done about 5 or 10 of the top books in the spirituality niche space. So he's not a novice at this. He's also an award-winning narrator. So I got a hold of him. I said, I'd love to have you do my book. First thing he said was, I'm going to be a little expensive. I said, I get that. I understand. We'll make that work. He said, the second thing is, I'm really busy. So I might not be able to get to this until the middle of 26. I said, yeah, I understand that too, but I'm willing to wait. So we got everything signed up. In an Audible, the narrator has to submit a 15-minute sample so that me hiring him says, yeah, this guy, bless this guy, and I'm okay with the work, right? So he does the 15-minute sample the next day. And then the day after, he gets a hold of me. He says, yeah, Kris, I'm not stopping. I'm finishing the book this week and I've postponed everything else and I'm going to get this done. I can't put it down. And he's done a phenomenal job. He adds a really vibrational, resonant texture to the reading of the book that for those people that like Audible, it's well worth listening to.
Thank you for sharing the story.
Yeah, it's a story I love to share because
I can see why. So there's one more question for you.
I'm ready.
How do you recommend that the listener go out and live their most alive lives?
Don't let fear and doubt stop you. Be open to listening to the small miracles that happen every single day in your life. Understand that there are no coincidence.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your time. This is one of the great joys of my life is this podcast and meeting new people and having these conversations. So thank
Awesome.
you very much. I appreciate
Thank you, Joni. I very much appreciate it.
it.
And phenomenal questions.
Thank you. Thank you. It's my curious mind.
I understand.
So if you'd like to learn more about Kris Land and his work and get his book and all the things, go to krisland.com or Google him, as he said. And to all of you listening, if this conversation sparks something inside of you, if you're navigating growth, change, leadership, or reinvention in your own life, I'd love to walk alongside you too. So just contact me at wakeupwithjoni.com for coaching opportunities and resources. Now, beautiful humans, it's your turn to go out and live your most alive lives.